Good morning, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to Friday morning at the Funhouse with Martin Popoff. Today, we've got a very cool show for you. But before we announce it, good morning, Martin. How are you today?
Yes, morning, Pete. Doing fine. It's definitely a nice warm day today. So
Yeah, here too. Yesterday as well. It hit the 70s yesterday. I was like, what? And then next week back to the 30s. So New York, yeah. So today, guys, what we've got in store for you today, Martin and I were talking a couple weeks ago, and we were kind of hashing around various ideas relating to vocalists, and there's so many different avenues we could have taken here. Then Martin,
you get my mic handy here. You probably can't hear me. So.
Oh, there we go. Now we go. I heard you before. I had my volume cranked way up, but yeah, okay.
Oh, okay.
Now it's perfect. So we toyed around with this idea. How about those guys who were probably really good singers, but they were like the kind of second guy in the band, not the main vocalist, the second banana, so to speak. But every time they would come up to the mic, whether they would sing the occasional lead vocal or do the backing vocals, you're like, whoa, pretty good, right? And in some instances, some of these guys went off maybe later on and became the main singer, right? But so the title of this one is Top Second Banana Vocalist. We've each picked 5, and I'm going to have Martin kick us off with this first one.
All right. So my first one is Steve Priest from this band Sweet. He's where is he here? He's this guy right here, the bass player. Sadly, we just lost him a little while ago, right? In fact, Andy is the only one left alive. We've lost 3 of these guys, and Sweet's on my brain right now because I just put out a Sweet book a couple weeks ago. So Steve Priest is kind of interesting. All along the way, Brian Connolly was their lead singer, but obviously he had the problems with alcohol. But all along the way, Sweet are the band like Queen that had the patented pre-Def Leppard, beautiful angelic vocal harmonies thing. And Steve and Andy both, the guitarist, were big parts of all of that. And they occasionally took lead vocals. So Steve is a second banana, and this one you get a bonus with Andy as a second banana too. And it's funny, their voices are almost like their personalities. Steve is like the crazy droll rock star, so he's got a lot of drama in his voice. And Andy's the more thoughtful guy, and he sounds like an intellectual when he's singing, kind of thing. And they both have great voices, and they both are in the wheelhouse of Brian more or less, which helps when they build these harmonies. But Steve is great. Probably his greatest, well, he sings Restless, which is a cool, Sweet song. He sings lead vocal. Their cover of My Generation, Misdemeanor, which is kind of a lower level one. He has a co-lead, or he goes in and out on Ballroom Blitz. But his big one is No You Don't. Great, heavy, crushing Sweet song, and he does a real sort of pathos, melodramatic vocal on that. And then later on, of course, he becomes the lead vocalist in the band when they can't make it work with Brian. Pete, as you mentioned before on shows, you've told the story about when Brian got stomped on the throat in a bar fight, which hurt his voice big time. He couldn't sing for a while, but then he just kind of never recovered. He never had confidence back again, and eventually he's out of the band. And then so for the last three albums, Steve Priest is their lead vocalist. So the bass player takes over on lead vocals, and Andy sings a lot of vocals too. But I think his other big one is Discophony off of this one, right? A great vocal on this, and I don't know. I just to reiterate on this album cover, this is kind of cool. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but this album's called Cut Above the Rest, right? And here they are splicing a tape, but it's actually a musical transcription, and they're just cutting right above the rest on this one. So it's kind of cool, eh?
I love that album cover. That is such a great album cover.
It's really cool. So, and it's also embossed, right? So so there you go. Steve Priest, great singer, no problem. And they had a lot to do with lead vocals and harmony vocals all along the way, and he had to actually take over, and they still sounded the same. I mean, as kids, I don't even remember not noticing that Brian wasn't there, without paying super attention the first time out. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to see some kind of trends here in some of our picks. Not all of them, but I'm looking at my list and I'm thinking, I mean, that there's basically you started off this show perfectly with that choice, and I think it's going to segue really fine into my next one. So Ken Hensley is my first choice of today from Uriah Heep. So here's a guy who had before Heep was formed, I mean, he had a bunch of other things going, a bunch of other bands, the Gods and Tofat and so on and so forth, and really strong personality, all around musician. He played keyboards and guitars, really good singer, and a really great songwriter. So he joins Uriah Heep. Uriah Heep forms. They have a lead singer named David Byron who does the bulk of the stuff. But for anybody who knows Uriah Heep, knows that the backing vocals were just as important in this band as the lead vocals. And maybe a lot of people didn't know it at the time, but occasionally on some of these albums, you'd get Ken Hensley singing lead, and he sounded exactly like David Byron. And it really wasn't until he started to release some solo albums like Proud Words on a Dusty Shelf, 73, Eager to Please in 75, and then eventually, later on after he left the band, he did Free Spirit in 1980. But you listen to those albums, and you're like, wow, he sounds exactly like David Byron, which I think is the reason why this band works so well from a vocal standpoint. And everybody always talks about those vocal harmonies. And a lot of people probably assumed it was David Byron multi-tracking the vocals. It wasn't. That was Ken Hensley there. So, at any given time, when you kind of think back on it, they probably could have, if they wanted to, when Byron left the band and before they brought John Lawton in, they probably could have had Ken just kind of take over vocals if that's what they wanted to do. And it would have sounded exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great idea, actually. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's scary how much their voices sound alike. And Ken went, obviously he joined Blackfoot for a few years where they didn't really utilize that much anymore, but he released plenty of solo albums over the years, and he turned into didn't turn into, he always was a wonderful vocalist. And I think that over time, people really recognized him for the great singer that he always was. So he, a perfect example for this show, like your choice as well, as a band that had two bona fide lead singers, really utilized one to the hilt, where the other one was just kind of sitting there waiting to be heard. And when you did, pretty amazing stuff happened. So that's my first choice for today.
Yeah, and a lot of backup vocals from the rest of the guys too, with Nick's famous thing that he always says when they compare them to Deep Purple, right? Oh, they had one singer, we had five, right?
Yeah.
And the Beach Boys of heavy metal and all that stuff, right? Yep. So yeah, a lot of weapons in that band. Yeah, excellent choice. All right, my next one is Peter Fredette, the bass player and backup vocalist for this band, although Peter does not play the bass on this one. Kim Mitchell, he plays the bass on this one. There's Peter's autograph down the side there, and Pi, one of the greatest lyricists of all time, Pi Dubois, and Kim. This is the Canadian cover of this debut full length from Kim. The States got a different cover. And this, by the way, anybody, this is the greatest 5-track EP of all time. Greatest EP of all time, I think. Every song on this is unbelievable. Check out a track called Chain of Events on this. Blow your mind. The drumming on this is incredible. It's heavy. It's just well put together. This is just a masterpiece. Unfortunately, it's only 5 songs. But the second, and this has a song called Rumor Has It, with a lead vocal from Peter, and it's the greatest guitar solo of all time. Rumor Has It on Kim Mitchell, Akimbo, a logo. So Peter Fredette. So Kim Mitchell, I never had a problem with Kim's voice. A lot of people kind of do, oddly. I've always found that surprising. It just never struck me as one of these that I never liked. But anyways, Peter Fredette has this high, perfect, dramatic, almost like a Steve Walsh kind of voice at times. And he's the perfect foil to Kim. And there's a ballad on here called All We Are that was a bit of a hit in Canada. I think it's a really smart, sophisticated, really cool ballad. It's like the way a band could have made power ballads and still kept their integrity. Beautiful, beautiful song. And it's a great example of these two guys duetting, and he just comes soaring in with the high parts on it. It's a beautiful, beautiful song. And like I say, smart, heavy, great drumming, even a little proggy, but it's an effortlessly lovable power ballad. So Peter takes the odd lead vocal, like I say he did on Rumor Has It. but he's always in there on the backup vocals and kind of like doing a co-harmony thing with Kim. And he's the bass player in his band. He's the bass player, I think, only on the first two, and he comes back later. I think, relations between him and Kim, I don't think were always that great, but what a talent. Great bass player. Looks awesome on stage, and he's like this Michael Anthony voice out of nowhere on this. Although Michael Anthony, we never heard him sing lead, but Peter would take a lead.
Yeah.
Derek St. Holmes, he's a Derek St. Holmes really in the band, right? He'd sing a song and all of a sudden people go, "Wow, your bass player can sing like this, unbelievable!" Right? So yeah, check him out on that EP. And that second album, you'll hear him regularly on that. So it's just this great second banana weapon in the band. There you go.
Yeah, I need to get more Kim Mitchell solo stuff. I have probably maybe 3 of them, probably the first 3, and they're great albums, really underrated albums. And your earlier statement about how people don't like Kim Mitchell's voice, how is that possible? The guy is a really good singer. He's got a very kind of radio friendly voice, I think. I've always thought.
Yeah, I've just heard that from time to time, right? It's got a little bit of a sardonic quality in it, a little bit of maybe a Frank Zappa quality in it to go with Pie's lyrics.
A little bit.
Frank Zappa-ish,
yeah.
Right? But it's funny. But having the two guys together is just a really cool thing.
Yeah, I think Kim Mitchell, Fee Waybill, Frank Zappa, they kind of, the 3 of them kind of are in the same kind of realm for me anyway. And I like all 3 of them quite a bit. So
yeah.
Go figure.
Cool. Excellent.
All right. So my next choice is going to kind of deviate a little bit from what we were just talking about. So it's Fred Turner from Bachman Turner Overdrive, otherwise known as BTO. Awesome. So in this instance, you've got a guy, he's the bass player, and the similarities to like ZZ Top are pretty amazing here in this choice. Here you got a guy who has a completely different voice to the main guy, Randy Bachman, who probably sang, I don't know, Martin, what would you say, 60% of the songs Randy sang? It was like 60,
maybe
40.
Even more.
Was it more? Maybe 70, 30? I don't know. I'm looking.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that Fred probably got at least 2 or 3 lead vocals on almost every album, at least the classic ones. But it's so jarring when you hear the 2 of them, because Randy's got this really kind of smooth, dare I say, radio-friendly voice. And then all of a sudden you get Fred, who's the big, gravelly, barrel-chested, swallowing glass type of voice. But he is the guy who sang most of the big, heavy hits, right? I mean, you look at some of the albums, Stone Gates, Let It Ride, Give It Time, off the second album. That's all Fred. And I think it's funny because most of the really big, heavy rockers that people remember from this band were sung by Fred.
And it Roll On Down the Highway, right? There's a big one.
Not Fragile, right? Blue Moanin'.
Burn Away. Yeah.
These are, it's like Randy sang the stuff that was more of the poppy, hits and whatever. And then when they wanted the big stomping tunes like Four Wheel Drive, She's a Devil, Flat Broke Love, Quick Change Artist, Don't Let the Blues Get You Down. That's all Fred. And they're night and day. And I think that's one of the things I really liked about BTO is you had these 2 forces of nature in this band, and it gave each album such variety. And then, of course, when Randy left, then it was up to Fred to sing all the songs, and it's almost like it was too much at that point, right? Like a whole album of Fred, maybe a little much, but so I don't know. I just think it was the perfect storm in this band, and you had the really heavy stuff, the little lighter stuff, occasionally the jazzy stuff, the pop tunes, the anthems, and then Fred would just come in and just kind of lay waste to everything with that big gravelly, mountainous voice, and so I thought that was a perfect choice for today as well.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, I swear we didn't choreograph this, but my next choice is ZZ Top with Dusty Hill, right? Same sort of thing. But Billy has a bunch of different things in his arsenal, like more so than Randy does. But he does have the Randy voice too. He does have the soft, sweet, almost fragile voice at times too. But he also has gravelly. But Dusty is a straight on Fred Turner. I mean, he is an amazing singer. And he just sweeps you up in the energy when he sings a song. This one has a track, a real heavy one on here. I love this album called Peace that he does. It's just an incredible performance from him. But he also does Heard It on the X, which is a duet with Billy. So there you get the graphic example of them together, and they do that on Beer Drinkers as well. So they're trading off, and they're both up there doing their little dance moves and stuff. They're just the coolest looking band when they're on, with that slight choreography they got going or whatever, right? And he sings Delirious. Let's see, Bad Girl from Eliminator, the heaviest song on Eliminator. Francine, Tush is his. Hi-Fi Mama from this one is him. And when we did that ZZ Top movie, there is a lot of footage of Dusty just singing the praises of loving singing. He almost feels like his lost calling in life is more so as a singer than as a bass player. And Elvis was his hero. So he just loves singing to death. It's the coolest thing he loves to do. And yeah, it's just this great contrast there. And he is absolutely the Fred Turner of ZZ Top.
Yeah. And that is so funny that we did not set this whole thing up that way, but it worked out perfectly. All right. So again, we're going to go from kind of that to a guy who I think perfectly complemented a really great singer. And it's almost like when you took that singer out of that band and put him in another band, that magic wasn't quite there. And I think the reason why is because you had Nuno Bettencourt saddled up next to Gary Cherone on backing vocals, and the two of them together made some pretty sweet music. And you can really hear it on the hits, obviously, more than words, and like Hole in My Heart, right? The two of them side by side, it's really fantastic. But I think Three Sides to Every Story is a perfect example of the two of those guys. And Nuno especially had a really sweet kind of melodic voice. And I said Freddie before Gary's voice, obviously, both of them big fan of Freddie Mercury, right? So I think that they really did a great job of hitting those kind of Queen-like harmonies. But the two of those guys together, Nuno alongside Gary, I think really worked. And the example I was talking about before is when you take Gary out of this band and you put him in Van Halen, even with a guy like Michael Anthony on bass, who is a fantastic backing vocalist, wasn't quite the same. Gary is not as easy on the ears on that Van Halen album as he is on the Extreme albums. And I think a lot of it has to do with having Nuno there beside him, backing vocals on almost every single song. And it's not like Nuno is a guy who, since Extreme, has, stopped kind of doing much of anything. It's not like he's gone out there to, kind of promote himself as a vocalist. Probably could if he wanted to. But I think in this band, as the second guy, it's one of the reasons that made this band so good from a vocal standpoint. It's like, the two of them together, absolute perfection, and really just produced some wonderful, wonderful vocal harmonies with the two of them side by side. So that's my next choice for number 3.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I never thought about that, but you're right. I mean, I think when he went to Van Halen, he added some vocal fry to his voice, either consciously or subconsciously, to sound more like Sammy Hagar, or not to sound more like Sammy Hagar, maybe, but he sounded more like Sammy Hagar. And I've never thought in Extreme that he sounded like Sammy Hagar, because like you say, he's a little moving the dial back over to where Nuno is. Yeah, on the Extreme stuff. Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Okay. All right. My next choice is here's my prop here that I haven't even opened yet, because I just opened Spotify and I realized it's all on there. Why even open the thing? Roger Taylor. This is the massive box set of everything he's ever done. Look at that. Look at the tracks on that thing, eh? Jeez. So that's Roger Taylor's canon. And no Queen here. This is Roger Taylor. So it's a big, huge box set done like that. And that's just to prove how cool a guy he is and how prolific. And I love his voice on The Cross, even though the songs in The Cross were kind of a little hit and miss here or there. Some of them were great. And the 2 solo albums are my favorite stuff by him. But I brought out Night at the Opera. It's kind of a cool one. This is a Japanese copy. But love his voice, probably even love his voice more than I love Freddie's voice. But Freddie is probably more of a singer. Freddie does more with his voice, and he has more you know, tricks in what he can do with it. Freddie does a lot of cool things with his voice, and he's probably the better singer. But Roger's a great singer. He's kind of like the Peter Criss drummer, right? Or Ace Frehley of the band, with that raspy, you know, Rod Stewart kind of voice. He's kind of the rock star, the aggressive voice in here. And I even like Brian's voice. Brian does some great singing on these albums too, but he's got more of the Randy Bachman fragile voice that can be a little pitchy and flat at times, because you can tell he's not pushing a lot of air when he sings, right? But Roger's roaring away, Fight from the Inside, Rocket Prime Jive, Loser in the End, I'm in Love with My Car is the big one, you know, with that, oh, you know, the machine or whatever he does there, right? It's a signature opening. Modern Times Rock and Roll, Drowse and Tenement Fuster with give me a good guitar. You can you say my hair's a disgrace, or just give me an open car, I'll make the speed of light out of this place, right? That whole thing. So when Roger sings, you definitely get a whole different vocalist who's singing great and just brings a whole new dimension to the band. Even though Freddie can have a lot of vocal fry and power to his voice as well, but it's just not the same kind of voice as Roger's. Roger's has this breathy, you know, as the cliche goes, Jack Daniels soaked sort of sounding voice, right? Little Rod Stewarty. So the cool thing is that band had Freddie with about 5 voices and then 2 extra vocalists.
At least 5,
had
right?
Like 7 vocalists in the band, right? Which is very cool. So,
and you know, I think even though for the most part the songs that Roger sang on all those albums were pretty heavy and fast, almost punky at times, there was a funk underpinning in a lot of those tunes that he also brought to the table, which they didn't do otherwise. And you know, it's funny, Martin.
Yeah.
I almost at the last minute, just to kind of, because we could have easily done it, I almost picked Brian May, and we both could have done, because I mean, you can make a case for the both of them, right? They're both the tied for the second, even though, you know, Roger sang more leads in the band, but I think Brian was pretty important on the backing vocal side. So that's a band that had a nice 3-prong attack there. And then when you count all of Freddie's different sides, pretty cool, right?
I made a note here, Brian May, All Dead, great mellow one, right?
Oh yeah.
Sail Away Sweet Sister, incredibly underrated, awesome rocker. And Long Away, that really cool one on a Day at the Races, like Poppy Birdsey sort of song. He sings those ones, right? So it's really cool. And he brought a lot to the band for sure. Yeah. And it's neat you bring up the funk thing too, because you can almost hear a little bit of James Brown stylings in what Roger does sometimes, right? Yeah.
Cool choice. All right, my number 2 here. Let's go to the band Styx. So obviously, you know, when you think of the classic period Styx, you got Dennis DeYoung and Tommy Shaw, pretty much the 2 main vocalist guys. So you can't really call either one second banana. However, a guy who earlier on in the career of Styx was easily one of the top guys from a vocal perspective, James Young, became that second banana guy once Tommy Shaw joined the band. And I think, you know, most people, when they think of James Young or JY, he was the guy on each of those Styx albums going forward after Tommy joined that would sing 1, maybe 2 songs, and he would sing the big, boisterous, almost like heavy metal tracks. Like, so on Grand Illusion, he sang, you know, Miss America. On Pieces of 8, he sings Great White Hope and Lords of the Ring. And then, of course, you know, you had Snowblind and, you know, all those songs kind of going forward. You always knew you'd get at least 1 James Young song on each album. He would be the you know, the big rocker guy in the band. But, you know, early on, he probably sang half the songs on all those old albums. I'm talking, you know, The Serpent is Rising, Man of Miracles. He sang a few tracks on Equinox, right? And so he was like one of the main guys. And it's interesting to listen to the early Styx albums. You know, his voice got a little rougher as time went on. And I think, you know, when you really look at the history of Styx, he was probably always better suited to not be that main guy, to be the guy to providing all those backing vocals and sing, you know, maybe 1, maybe 2 tracks on each album for effect, to add a little variety, and that's it. But I love him in that capacity. As much as I really like the early Styx albums, it's like, you know, he like I said, as he got older, I think his voice was better suited for just kind of special appearances and always there on the backing vocals to add that rough edge. So I thought he was another good example for this particular show, because he's a very competent singer. But probably the role that he has now, and he's had now for the last, 35, 40 years, is probably the best suited for him in that band.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And oddly, he looks a little bit like Dusty Hill and Frank Beard, right? I mean, Dusty Hill and Fred Turner, right? I mean, they're both like the, the facial hair and the blondie guys, right? So yeah, it's funny, and they serve that purpose in the band, right? They're like the we're gonna walk on the wild side a little bit here.
We'll bring the heavy hitter out for a song or two, right?
Yeah, funny. All right. So my number one choice is, and I felt this is number one because I really like what he brings to the band, and it's so important, is Keith Richards. I brought out some of the newer albums to show, because I went back and I was playing a bunch of the Keith sung songs, and I realized his earlier ones, I'm not crazy about his voice. When he's young, he has a little bit of a yanging, nasal, slightly higher, more hyper voice. And as soon as he's got some living under his belt, the voice gets gruffer, and his style, I think he becomes more confident, and the style becomes more laid back, and he sounds amazing. So yeah, on the likes of Voodoo Lounge, there's a song on here called The Worst, which is just this great, short, mellow, kind of ballad kind of thing. On this one, hang on, what do we got here? Bridges to Babylon. Well, actually, yeah. So through and through also on this one, which is kind of like a weird, almost Tom Waitsy ballady type thing. Tom Waits is a good kind of comparison. This Place Is Empty on this one, and then the big ones are the likes of Before They Make Me Run is like in the middle era, between the older stuff and the newer. Happy is pretty good for an early one, but Slipping Away on Steel Wheels, I love that as well. He to me has the better voice, although maybe the voice is tied with Mick, but I think Keith is the better singer. Mick has like Freddie Mercury, he has different gears. And when he's doing the shouty thing, I'm not that much of a fan. But when he's singing, it's amazing, right? So when he does the higher and the singing kind of thing. But Keith, I just love his singing. I love his voice. He's just like this great storyteller and stylist. He's just the way he phrases things all along. And he's doing like Little TNA and what else does he? And the Talk Is Cheap album, there's a song on that record called Make No Mistake, which is a ballad, which just love it to death. So I love his ballads. I love his mellower stuff that he does. What else we got? Thief in the Night on Bridges to Babylon. He does You Got the Silver. So yeah, Coming Down on Goat's Head Soup is his. But yeah, Little TNA is an amazing one as well. So yeah, just always welcome seeing him come along. And there's so many parallels to like your Joe Perry singing on an album, which I don't think usually works really at all. Or Nicky Wire on Manic Street Preachers. There's parallels to that second guy. If you want to go way down the food chain, Ronnie Montrose singing a song on Paper Money, right? But Keith, I'm absolutely welcome. I'm glad to hear it almost every time, and it's usually on a really cool, smoky, soulful ballad. So there you go, Keith Richards.
He's got like a fragileness about his voice that I think is very endearing to a lot of Stones fans. And I always kind of like equate it to like, it's this fragile thing, and he sounds half in the bag, and that's what's kind of so charming about it, right?
Yeah,
it's like especially if you watch, if you've seen them live, or obviously we've all seen plenty of live clips of them over the years. I mean, he just he comes up to the microphone, and he's just kind of like, he's barely standing up and whatever. But that's Keith, right? And it's like, and even if he's completely sober, that's just the way he is and the way he acts, and his voice is kind of like that. And I think, it's always. I think for a lot of people, the highlight of a Stones concert is getting to see Keith come up to the microphone and sing a couple songs, right? Because Mick is like the complete showman. I mean, nobody's ever going to mistake Mick Jagger for being the most amazing singer on the planet. But for the total package, he absolutely is one of the greats. I mean, I love Mick Jagger. I think he's awesome. But
I think he's the greatest frontman of all time.
I wouldn't argue that, Martin. I would say if he's not number one, he's number two.
Yeah.
I've always, you know, the guys that I always think about as that front man guy, that the best in the business. Mick always comes up. Freddie always comes up. I mean, you know, there's a couple others you could throw up there, but those two guys, amazing because they're the total package, right? They bring everything to the table. And quite frankly, who can do what Mick is doing at his age? I mean, come on. Yeah. But yeah, you know, I think Keith is a great pick for this, and I think he also, you know, you talk about the older days, right? When he wasn't coming out of his shell as much. I think him hanging out with Graham Parsons back in the day and really immersing himself in that whole like kind of like West Coast country rock thing brought him out of his shell vocally, I think, because he started to do a lot more vocals after that. And again, he had that twang, right? It's almost like he came from that scene, even though he's a British guy, which is kind of interesting.
Cool. Yeah. Excellent.
All right, so my final choice today is a guy who we don't really think of as a second banana anymore because he has, since the band broke up that I'm going to talk about, he went on to become the singer guy in whatever project or band he was with, solo career, all that kind of stuff. I'm talking about Glenn Hughes, specifically in Deep Purple. So brought on board, so to kind of go back in time a little bit here. So of course, Ian Gillan and Roger Glover had left Deep Purple after Who Do We Think We Are? The band is in search of a new bass player and a new singer. They go to see Trapeze playing live somewhere. I don't even remember where the hell it was, US, or I'm not even sure where. And of course, the guys in the band were really taken by him. You know, of course, he was the main singer and bass player in Trapeze. They were more thinking of bringing him in as a bass player and maybe doing some vocals, right? And then Richie Blackmore was really taken with this young unknown singer named David Coverdale, because Blackmore really wanted Paul Rodgers in the band, and that didn't work out for obvious reasons because Bad Company was happening right around the same time. So for him, Coverdale was going to be that guy in a similar vein. So they brought both of them in, but of course, Glenn was kind of thinking that he was going to be the main singer, right? Because that's what he was used to. But you almost like the rest of the guys were like, well, we can't have a bass player lead singer because that takes away from the dynamic of the band. We've always had a lead singer front man out just doing that. So they experimented with this configuration for the Burn album and then eventually Stormbringer, where Coverdale would sing most of all the lead vocals, but Glenn would add backing vocals and lead parts, like maybe on the chorus or on some of the verses in almost every track. And that would continue from Burn onto Stormbringer. He sang one lead on Stormbringer. And then, of course, on the Come Taste the Band album, he would sing a couple lead vocals. But it was like you had the soulful Coverdale, and then you had this kind of like, this white R&B singer who could do the Gillan style wailing as well, but also had that really kind of soulful voice that complemented Coverdale's voice as well. But Coverdale was never the kind of Gillan guy. It's funny how and Martin and I are probably going to talk about this a bit on the next show we're going to be doing together. But I think that Coverdale and Hughes, even together, really couldn't tackle the Gillan stuff. But I think at doing what they did on those three albums together, pretty magical. They brought a soulfulness, a bluesiness to the band, which I think was much needed. But you could always tell that Hughes was kind of wanting to be that main guy. But I think it really worked the two of them together. And you listen to those couple albums and you hear Glenn Hughes all the time, not the lead guy, but he's prevalent in every single song. And then after Purple broke up, of course, he never kind of looked back that way again. He was the main vocalist no matter what he did. Tons of solo albums, Black Country Communion in recent years, the Hughes Thrall album, Black Sabbath. I mean, the list goes on and on, Gary Moore, so on and so forth. But he is a perfect example of that really strong second banana guy back in the day who then catapulted that and said, I'm never looking back. I'm never doing that again. I'm going to be the main guy. So.
Yeah, perfect choice. Absolutely, one of the early key super famous examples of this, almost to the point of a quarterback controversy, right? Yeah. And he has to go on and be the quarterback later, right? So yeah, perfect. Good.
So there you have it, everybody. Some very cool second banana of vocalists. I don't know, Martin, if you want to throw out a couple honorable mentions here, if you had any.
Boy, I don't know. Maybe we'll save them and see if we could do it.
We could totally do
again.
that. I think we could squeeze one more out of this.
Yeah.
It's like if you guys have noticed over the last couple of weeks, Martin and I have been doing these what originally intend to be a one shot, but then in actuality make a pretty good twofer, right? So and more than two, questionable, but to get two really cool episodes on a topic, I think works really well. So why don't we do that? No honorable mentions. I'm going to save the ones I have for episode number 2, and we'll do that maybe next week or the week after. We'll figure it out. Maybe next week we can probably do that. So because I got a couple good ones, I know Martin does as well, and I can pull out a few more. So so there you have it. So if there's any you think we forgot, put them in the comments below. We'll be checking those out, and visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. Martin, you want to plug any new books that have come in or anything like that?
Not particularly. I suppose just the suite is recent, and I do get this Flaming Telepaths Imaginos specified and expanded, or expanded and specified. Anyways, I get that either later today or Monday, martinpopoff.com. So those are the two key ones.
Cool. All right. I'm waiting for the big announcement that the Uriah Heep one is ready. That's the one I'm waiting for.
Yeah.
Get that thing in there. Come on.
Yeah, it's still the printer in Turkey.
China.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Sure.
So stay tuned, everybody. Martin and I are coming right back. He is going to be joining me on today's edition of Dream Set List, none other than Deep Purple. So stay tuned for that and more coming up over the weekend and into next week. For Martin Popoff, I am Pete Pardo. See you all later on.